The pie tin was still on the counter when my phone rang. I had taken it out of the cabinet that morning out of habit, the same way I had been taking it out every November for 31 years. My wife used to start her sweet potato pie the night before Thanksgiving, letting the filling rest overnight so the spices had time to settle into each other. She said her grandmother taught her that patience was the secret ingredient. After she passed, I kept the tin on the same shelf, in the same spot, because some things you just don't move. I hadn't baked a pie in 3 years. I wasn't sure I ever would again. But I took the tin out anyway, set it on the counter, and stood there in my kitchen in Nashville looking at it like it might tell me something. Then my phone rang. It was my daughter. I answered the way I always did, with a warmth I didn't have to manufacture, because hearing her voice still did something good to me no matter what kind of day I was having. She was my only child. After her mother died, she was the thing I organized my whole life around. I had restructured my entire retirement plan around being present for her, being the kind of father who showed up, who helped, who never let distance, emotional or physical, grow between us. "Dad," she said, and I could tell immediately from the way she said that one word that the conversation was not going to go the way I hoped. There was a flatness to it, a rehearsed quality, like she had been practicing the sentence that came next. "I need to talk to you about Thanksgiving." I waited. "It's just that my husband's parents are flying in from Phoenix. His whole family is going to be here. His sister, her kids, his aunt." She paused. "It's going to be a lot of people, and it could get kind of overwhelming. And my husband thinks it might be better if I'm not there," I said. The silence that followed was its own answer. "It's just this 1 year, Dad. We'll do something together after. Just the 3 of us. We can do lunch the following weekend, wherever you want." I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone, looking at that empty pie tin on the counter, and I said, the only thing a man can say when his daughter tells him he is not welcome at the table he helped build. "Okay," I told her. "I understand." I didn't understand, but I said it anyway. Let me back up, because this moment didn't arrive out of nowhere. Things rarely do. When you're living inside a situation, the warning signs have a way of blending into the background, the way a slow leak in the roof seems manageable, until one morning the ceiling comes down. Looking back now, I can trace the whole thing to a single 1.5 years of choices that I told myself were fine, that I convinced myself were temporary, that I watched accumulate the way debt accumulates quietly, and then all at once. My daughter met her husband at a work event about 4 years ago. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, the kind of charm that is actually just confidence wearing a friendlier mask. He had a firm handshake, remembered details about conversations you'd had weeks earlier, and had an opinion about everything that he delivered, with just enough humor that you didn't realize until later how rarely he asked for anyone else's. I didn't dislike him when I first met him. I want to be honest about that. I thought he was a little too polished, a little too certain of himself for a man in his mid-30s who hadn't yet done much of what he talked about doing. But I told myself I was being a protective father. I told myself I needed to give the man a fair chance. My daughter was happy. That mattered more than my instincts. They got engaged 14 months after they started dating. I paid for the wedding. I want to be clear about that, not to earn sympathy, but because it's relevant to what came later. $64,000. I had been saving for years, partly because my wife and I had talked about it when our daughter was small, and partly because after my wife died, spending that money on our daughter's wedding felt like honoring something. The venue was in Brentwood. It was beautiful. My son-in-law stood at the altar and cried, and I thought, well, maybe I was wrong about him. 6 months after the wedding, my son-in-law told my daughter he wanted to open a restaurant. He had been working in restaurant management for several years and had always talked about owning his own place. He had a vision for it, an upscale Southern food concept, the kind of place where the biscuits cost $14 and the menu changes every season. He had a location in mind, a space in East Nashville that needed significant build-out. He had drawings. He had a business plan that he had clearly spent real time on. He sat across from me at my kitchen table and walked me through it page by page. The problem was the money. The build-out alone was going to run close to $200,000. He had some savings. My daughter had some savings. They had looked at small business loans, but the interest rates were unfavorable, and the bank wanted a cosigner with assets, someone who could backstop the loan if the business struggled in its early years. He looked at me. I looked at him. My daughter looked at her hands. I want to tell you, I thought about it carefully. I did think about it. I spent 2 weeks going over the numbers, talking to my own financial advisor, asking questions about the business plan. But the truth is that from the moment he asked, and there was a version of me, a version I still believe was acting from love, that thought, this is what fathers do. You use what you have to give the people you love a real chance. I co-signed the loan, $180,000. Beyond that, I contributed $40,000 of my own money directly as a capital infusion, framed as a gift, to help them get through the first year, while the restaurant found its footing. Total investment in my son-in-law's dream, $220,000 on top of the $64,000 for the wedding. The restaurant opened to decent reviews. My son-in-law was talented, I'll give him that. The food was genuinely good. The space looked exactly like his drawings. In those first months, he was energized in a way that made him easier to be around. He'd call me sometimes just to tell me about a dish that had worked out, a supplier he'd found, a piece of press the restaurant had gotten. Those were good months. I let myself believe the investment had been the right call. Then the restaurant started doing well. Not just surviving, actually well. And something shifted. I can't point to one specific day it happened. I can only tell you that over the following year, my son-in-law became a different person to me. Not to everyone. To the people at his restaurant, to his friends, to his family in Phoenix, he was the same charming, confident man. But to me, the man who had written a personal check for his dream and put my retirement security on the line as his co-signer, he became distant in the particular way that people become distant when they want to forget they ever needed you. Phone calls stopped getting returned promptly. When I came to the restaurant for dinner, which I tried not to do too often because I understood it was his space and I didn't want to crowd him, he was always busy, always pulled in another direction, always greeting me with a clap on the shoulder and then disappearing into the kitchen. My daughter started echoing his rhythms. If he was busy, she was busy. If he wasn't available, she wasn't available. I told myself it was just the demands of running a business. I told myself newly married couples needed their space. I drove to their house on a Sunday in February to drop off a piece of furniture my daughter had mentioned, wanting a small side table that had belonged to her mother. And my son-in-law opened the door and told me they were in the middle of something and that it wasn't a great time. He didn't invite me in. My daughter appeared behind him in the hallway and gave me a small, apologetic smile and didn't say anything. I drove home with her mother's side table still in the back of my truck. That was February. By May, I had started to understand that what I was experiencing wasn't a phase. A colleague of my son-in-law's, a woman who handled some of the restaurant's catering accounts and had met me a few times at events, ran into me at a hardware store in April. She was friendly, asked how I was doing, said something about how proud I must be of the restaurant's success. Then she said, with genuine curiosity, that she'd heard I had helped get the whole thing off the ground, that she'd heard from someone on staff that I was the reason the restaurant existed at all. I told her that was generous, but that my son-in-law had done all the real work. She tilted her head and said, "That's funny. He told us he built it completely on his own, saved for years. Never had any outside help." I didn't say anything. I bought my hardware and drove home and sat in my truck in the driveway for a long time. I want to tell you that I confronted him about it. I didn't. I told myself it was probably just the way the story had gotten simplified in the retelling, the way people collapse complicated truths into cleaner narratives. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as my daughter was happy and the business was thriving. I am 63 years old, and I have learned, sometimes the hard way, that most battles aren't worth fighting. But I filed it away. You always file things away. Summer arrived, and with it my birthday. I turned 63 in July. My daughter called in the morning, which I appreciated. She asked if I wanted to do dinner that weekend. I said yes. She said she'd check with her husband and get back to me. She didn't get back to me. A week passed. I texted. She said they'd had a crazy week and could we push it another weekend? I said, of course. Another week passed. I stopped bringing it up. I spent my 63rd birthday eating takeout at my kitchen table with the television on, which is not a thing I say for sympathy. I say it because I want you to understand the texture of what was happening. It wasn't one dramatic blow. It was a series of small cuts so close together that you start to feel them as a single wound. By October, my son-in-law had stopped reaching out to me entirely. My daughter had become the intermediary in a communication structure that increasingly felt designed to manage me rather than include me. When I expressed that I missed seeing them, she would offer a vague future plan that never materialized. When I asked how things were going, she gave me summaries so brief they felt like press releases. I am not a man who asks for much. I worked 38 years as a licensed electrician. I built my own home with my own hands over the course of 4 years in my 30s. I raised a daughter through grief and adolescence and the particular chaos of her early 20s without once asking her to be something she wasn't. I did not need to be thanked every day for the money I had given. I did not need my son-in-law to make me his best friend. I still believe this was a reasonable need to be treated like a person who mattered, like a father. Like a man who had sacrificed real things for the people at that table. Then November came, and my daughter called, and I was told I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving. I put the pie tin back in the cabinet. I drove to a diner 2 miles from my house and ate a turkey plate special alone at the counter, and the woman who refilled my coffee asked if I was doing okay, and I told her I was just fine. Thank you. And she looked at me the way people look at you when they know you're not fine, but understand that you need to say you are. I drove home. I sat in my armchair. The house was quiet in the way that houses are quiet when something has been decided. I opened my laptop and pulled up the loan documents. Now, I want to be very precise about something, because this matters. When I co-signed that business loan, I also set up an automatic payment arrangement that supplemented my son-in-law's monthly payments. The loan amount was significant enough that in the early years, before the restaurant was profitable, the monthly payment was a strain. I had stepped in voluntarily, from my own account, to cover a portion of each payment, roughly 40%, so that they wouldn't fall behind and damage their credit while they found their footing. This was not part of any formal agreement. There was no contract. It was a father-in-law quietly backstopping his daughter's life, because that was who he was. My son-in-law knew about it. My daughter knew about it. We had never discussed stopping it, because stopping it had never come up. It was just something that happened every month, automatically, while they built their lives, and I was slowly erased from them. I sat with those documents for a long time. I looked at the numbers. I thought about my wife, about the pie tin, about the side table still sitting in my garage because I had never brought myself to take it back inside after the day my son-in-law didn't let me through the door. Then I picked up the phone and called my bank. It was a simple phone call. I canceled the automatic supplemental payment. The loan itself was in my son-in-law's name. He was responsible for that, and I had no intention of doing anything to damage it. I was just a co-signer. I was just the man who had been quietly adding to the payment every month out of love for his daughter. I was simply choosing to stop doing a thing I had never been obligated to do in the first place. The customer service representative asked if I wanted to confirm the cancellation. I told her yes. Thanksgiving came and went. I don't know what happened at my daughter's table that day. I imagined it went fine. I imagined my son-in-law carved a turkey and made his family laugh, and was the charming, capable man I had watched him perform at every gathering I'd been allowed to attend. I went to my neighbor's house for Thanksgiving. He is a retired school teacher who lost his wife 2 years before I lost mine, and we had developed a habit of spending holidays together when our families were otherwise occupied. He makes a very good cornbread dressing. We watched football. It was not a bad day. My daughter texted me that evening. "Hope you had a good day, Dad. We'll plan something soon." I wrote back, "Sounds good. Hope yours was wonderful." Nothing happened for 3 weeks. I went to work at my part-time consulting job. I do electrical inspections for a renovation company, 2 or 3 days a week, because it keeps me useful and because the routine is good for me. I cooked dinner. I went to my neighbor's house twice for chess. I did not call my daughter, and she did not call me, and the silence between us settled in the way that silences do when both sides are waiting for the other one to break first. The call came on a Thursday evening in December, just past 7 o'clock. It was my son-in-law's number. He almost never called me directly anymore, so when I saw his name on the screen, I sat up a little straighter in my chair. I answered calmly. "Hey," he said. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard before, something tight in it, like a man trying to sound casual about something that is anything but. "Do you have a minute?" I told him I did. I'm trying to figure something out with the loan payments, and I noticed that the supplemental amount hasn't come through for November, and now December's looking the same, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay on your end. Like, with your account or whatever? "Everything is fine on my end," I said. A pause. "Okay, so is there something going on? Because that payment has been coming every month for like 2 years, and the timing is kind of—" "I canceled it," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "You canceled it?" "Yes." "Why?" I thought about several ways to answer that question. I thought about telling him about the woman at the hardware store who told me he claimed he'd built everything on his own. I thought about the February Sunday with the side table in the back of my truck. I thought about eating a turkey special alone at a diner counter while his family sat around my daughter's table. I thought about 63 years old and a pie tin that hadn't been used in 3 years. "Because I decided to," I said. "That payment was always voluntary. I was never obligated to make it. I've decided to use that money differently going forward." "That's okay. That's a significant amount every month. That's been factored into how we manage cash flow. The restaurant has some slower months in the winter, and we've always counted on." "I understand," I said. "You'll need to adjust." He asked me if this was about Thanksgiving. He asked it in a tone that suggested he thought the very question was beneath him, that he was humoring me by asking. "This is about my financial choices," I said, "which are mine to make." He said my name in a way that was trying to be firm and reasonable at the same time, and failing at both. He said we should talk about this. He said that canceling without notice was, and he searched for the word irresponsible. "Irresponsible," I repeated. "You're a co-signer on this loan. If the restaurant's cash flow gets disrupted and we miss a payment, your credit is affected too. So this isn't just—" "I appreciate the reminder," I said. "I'll make sure the loan payments don't miss. I have no intention of letting the loan default. I'm just no longer making additional voluntary contributions to your business operations. You'll want to make sure your December payment is submitted by the due date from your own account." Silence. "I'll let you get back to your evening," I said. I hung up. My daughter called 11 minutes later. I watched her name appear on the screen, and then I watched it stop appearing, and then I got up and made myself a cup of tea and went to bed at a reasonable hour. She called again in the morning, and then again at noon, and then she came to my house. I opened the door when she knocked. She looked the way people look when they have been rehearsing a conversation and have lost the thread of it the moment you open the door and they see your actual face. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's way of holding her jaw when she was trying not to cry, and for a moment I just looked at her and felt the grief of the whole thing in a way that had nothing to do with money. She came inside. She sat down at my kitchen table. I made coffee. "He called you last night," she said. "He did. He's upset. He says you canceled a payment without any warning and it's going to affect their planning for the quarter." "Their planning?" I said. "Yes. They'll need to account for it." "Dad." She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. "Why are you doing this?" I sat down across from her. I thought for a moment about how to answer. Not because I didn't have the words, because I wanted to say them clearly, without anger, in a way that she would actually hear. "Do you remember your mother's side table?" I said. "The little one with the turned legs, the dark walnut. She kept it in the bedroom, by the reading chair." My daughter nodded slowly. "I brought it to you in February. You'd mentioned wanting it, after she died. I thought you'd want it in your home. I drove it over on a Sunday afternoon." I paused. "Your husband opened the door and told me it wasn't a great time. You stood behind him and didn't say a word. The table is still in my garage." She looked down at the table. "And your birthday dinner that never happened?" I said. And the way your calls started coming every 3 weeks instead of every 3 days. And Thanksgiving? The Thanksgiving thing was... Your husband didn't want me there, I said. I'm not asking you to argue with that. I know that's what it was. I'm asking you to understand that a man who has given your husband $300,000 of his life savings, and more than that, given you every good thing he had to give, deserves at minimum a seat at the Thanksgiving table. She was quiet. I didn't cancel those payments to punish anyone, I said, which was mostly true. I canceled them because I realized I had been funding a life that had no room for me in it. And that's a hard thing to look at plainly. But once you see it, you can't pretend you didn't. She cried then. Not the kind of crying that's an argument, but the kind that means something real is breaking open. She cried, and I handed her a paper towel because I never have tissues in the house, and she laughed a little through the tears the way her mother used to when she was caught between feelings. I didn't know he was, she started. I know you didn't. I started just going along with because it was easier than... I know, I said. I understand why you did. She looked at me. I'm so sorry, Dad. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. I know you are, sweetheart. We sat together for a while. The coffee went cold. The winter light came through the kitchen window at the low angle it takes in December, falling across the counter and the cabinet where the pie tin was. I want to tell you that my son-in-law came around gracefully. He didn't. Not at first. What happened over the next several weeks was messier than any clean resolution I could hand you. He called me twice more, each time slightly less polished than the last, the charm wearing thin as the financial pressure of January mounted. The restaurant's slower winter months were apparently slower than he had planned for. He had structured their personal finances around a cash flow that included my quiet monthly infusions, which is a thing he would never have admitted if I hadn't simply stopped doing it. The second call, he told me I was being vindictive, that I was weaponizing money, that any reasonable person would have come to him directly if they had a problem instead of just cutting off support without warning. When my daughter told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving, I said, I didn't hang up the phone and start a negotiation. I just said okay. I adjusted. I figured out a different plan for myself. I'm asking you to do the same thing. He didn't have an answer for that. The third call was different. It came late on a January evening, and the tone was different, flatter, more tired. He said he'd been thinking about what I said. He said he knew things had gotten, he searched for the right word and landed on lopsided. He said he hadn't handled things well, and that he knew my daughter had talked to me about it, and that he understood. If I was, he trailed off. I want to come for dinner sometime, I said. That's all I want. To sit at the table, to be treated like I exist. He said that was fair. He sounded like a man who had run out of angles and found, at the end of them, something like honesty. I reinstated a smaller version of the supplemental payment the following month, not the full amount, about half. I did it because the loan was mine too, and because I genuinely did not want the restaurant to fail, and because the point had never been to destroy anything. The point had been to stop disappearing. My son-in-law's parents came to visit in February. They drove up from Phoenix, a retired couple in their late 60s who I had met only once before, briefly, at the wedding. My daughter called me and asked if I would like to come for dinner Saturday night. She said it would be the four of us plus her in-laws. She said she wanted me there. I brought wine. My son-in-law's mother had made a dessert from a family recipe and offered me the first piece. My son-in-law poured my wine before anyone else's. Small gestures. Not sweeping reconciliation. Nothing in real life moves that cleanly. But gestures. The kind that means someone has thought about you before you walked in the door. After dinner, when my son-in-law's father and I ended up in the kitchen while the others talked in the living room, he asked me how long I'd been in Nashville. I told him 32 years. He asked if I'd built that life from scratch, or whether I'd had help getting started. I thought about it honestly. Both, I said. You need both. You need people who believe in you enough to help, and you need to be the kind of person who deserves that belief. He nodded like a man who understood exactly what I was actually saying. I drove home that night on the interstate, the city lights spreading out across the December dark, and I thought about my wife. I thought about what she would have made of all of it, the whole long arc of that year. The money and the side table and the pie tin and the diner counter and the Thursday evening phone call. She was a wiser person than me. She would have seen it coming earlier and handled it with more grace than I did. But she also, I think, would have understood the night I sat in my armchair with those loan documents and picked up the phone. She was not a woman who confused love with allowing herself to be made invisible. She taught me, over 31 years, that the most profound act of love is sometimes simply insisting that you are real, that you are present, that you are standing in this room and you require acknowledgement. There are things that matter in a family. They are not complicated things. You show up, you tell the truth. You do not use people and then pretend they are strangers. And when someone teaches you quietly, without a confrontation, without a single raised voice, that your absence has consequences, you learn something about what their presence was worth all along. The pie tin is back on the counter now. It has been there since March. My daughter called me in late February and asked if I still had her mother's recipe, the sweet potato pie, the one her grandmother had taught her. I told her I did. She asked if I would teach her. She came over on a Saturday afternoon, and we stood in my kitchen together, and we made it slowly, the right way, the way her mother had always said, patient with the spices, patient with the filling, patient with each other. She carried the finished pie out to her car wrapped in a dish towel. She stood by the driver's door and looked back at me on the porch. "I love you, Dad," she said. "I know you do," I told her. "I love you too." She drove away. I went back inside. The kitchen smelled like November, like cinnamon and nutmeg and something I can only describe as continuity, the particular scent of a thing that has been interrupted and resumed, that has found its way back to itself through the most ordinary possible miracle of showing up and deciding to try again. I washed the bowls. I dried my hands on the dish towel. I put the pie tin back on the same shelf where it has always lived, where it will stay until next time, when someone needs it. Some lessons do not require a speech. They do not require a confrontation or a climax, or a single dramatic moment that announces itself as the turning point. Some lessons are delivered in the quiet language of consequence, in the space between what you assumed would always be there and the morning you wake up and find it gone. Some lessons are a canceled payment and a Thursday phone call, and a man at his kitchen table saying, with complete and unhurried calm, "I was always here. I was always worth your time. I have simply decided to stop pretending otherwise." The window above the sink looks out onto the backyard. In the early evening light of a Nashville spring, the yard my wife planted is beginning to come back, the irises along the fence line, the old oak she loved, the space along the back where we always meant to put a garden and never quite got to. There is still time for a garden. There is still time for a great many things. I put on the kettle. I set 2 cups on the counter because my daughter is coming for lunch tomorrow, and that is simply what we do now. We show up. We sit together. We take our time. Some things, once interrupted, come back different, not worse, different, more deliberate, more honest about their own weight. I look at my kitchen table and I see every conversation that has ever happened at it. Her mother in the mornings with her coffee, my daughter as a teenager doing homework across from me, the long, quiet dinners of my widower years. And now this, a family finding its shape again, after it had gone soft at the edges and needed, gently but firmly, to be reminded of what it was. There are 63 years of living in this body, and I have learned very little with certainty. But this much I know: the quietest moves speak the loudest. And the man who can sit across a table from the person who dismissed him and pour the coffee without bitterness, without performance, without needing the moment to be more than it is, that man has won something that has no name for it but peace. I turned off the kitchen light. I walked down the hall. The house settled around me the way old houses do at night, the familiar language of timber and plaster that has heard everything and said nothing and kept every secret I ever asked it to keep. I slept well that night. I have been sleeping well for a while now.